Welcome to Living Soil Matter, the first episode. I have Chris here, a good buddy of mine. We're at his garden that he does in his backyard here in Massachusetts. We're just going to talk about what he has lined up here in the garden, and then we'll get into an introduction a little bit later. So we're standing here next to, you said, some currant?
Yeah, these are black currant gooseberries.
Nice.
Got a nice heavy fruit set on them. They're about maybe on their 4th year now.
Nice.
Getting into some good fruit production.
And I'm standing in front of right now some radishes.
Yeah, this is radish and beet
Nice.
here. They're got a little eaten by the woodchuck this spring, but starting to grow in a bit now.
Nice. Well, let's just do it, I guess, clockwise? So what we have over here?
Yeah, moving around the circle garden clockwise. This is peas, and the peas are my early crop, so I do the peas in the spring, and then once they're about finished, I get the cucumbers in the same spot, and they like to climb on the same sort of trellis system, so that seems to be a good combination. And you can see all the weeds, the lamb's quarters I use as living mulch.
Nice.
So I let the lamb's quarters grow up. They're a tasty spring green that I like to eat and put in soups and salads and things like that. And then once they start to overcrowd the plants, I'll cut them back and let all the tops just kind of die on the soil to keep the moisture in and keep that soil healthy and provide some nice nutrients and everything. And usually get maybe 5 or 6 crops of the lamb's quarters per year. They just keep growing from the stems. I don't actually pull them up, just cut them, let them lie, and then they regrow.
Nice. What we got lined up here? There's some tomatoes?
Those are the cukes.
The cubes.
Yeah. So those are the cukes. They'll go. This used to have the peas in it, and now it's transitioning over to the cucumbers. This is going to be another cucumber bed for a second crop.
Okay.
Usually do 2 or 3 crops to try to stagger out the harvest a little bit. And these are peppers here. And this is a nice bed here. Should grab a photo of this at some point, but this is a cover crop bed. I'm doing a whole recovery system here. So this has been sheet mulched several times. The sheet mulching is just where you layer cardboard and mulch, and then I usually top dress with some compost.
Nice.
So after the sheet mulching has killed off all the weeds, I have 3 cover crops planted in here. It's a combination of oats and hairy vetch and clovers.
Nice.
So the oats are really great for weed suppression. They grow really fast and tall. The oat tops are also a good medicine for humans, you know, in addition to being good for the soil. And the hairy vetch and the clovers are both legumes, so they fix nitrogen and help to build the nutrients in the soil. So what I'll do here is kind of the same thing as with the lamb's quarters. We'll let these grow up till they're waist high or so, and then they'll get chopped, not actually pulled up, but just cut right at the base. All the plant material will lie down in the soil and protect the soil, insulate it. It's called just green mulching.
Yeah.
And then I'll reseed and repeat.
Nice. A little bit green mulch tip there for you guys. So we got peppers, and then right over here, what we got going on?
So here we're moving along to the onions. Onions and leeks, which I grow in this bed. And you can see I have several different ages of the onions. I think for things like carrots and leeks and onions and a lot of your greens, it's really important to stagger your planting so that you have all different ages of different crops so that you get a continuous harvest throughout the year.
Nice.
So you can see there's a bunch of babies, and then there's a leek there that's actually just about to flower. So that leek was from last year. I left one or two, and I think there's two there. And I didn't harvest them last fall, end of last summer. And then they'll overwinter. The bulb, it will die back to the bulb in the soil.
Right.
And then the following year, they will produce a flower. And then that will self-seed. So, sometime in a month or so, it'll be putting down seeds and providing my leek harvest for the fall.
Nice. Do you ever collect the seeds, or?
I do collect the seeds for some things, but with plants like carrots and leeks and the greens like arugula, they will just happily self-seed. So I just let the plant take its natural course.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, what we got going on behind us here?
Yeah, so back here I have two different varieties of beans. I've got some climber beans along the fence here. So they'll climb up there and enjoy that space. And then in the front there's some bush beans.
Yum, yum, yum.
Yep.
And what do we have in this bed going on here?
Yeah, so this bed is my greens bed. We're kind of moving on to a little bit of a shadier half of the garden. So that seems to work out really well because they get the full sun in the spring before the tree leaves have come in when they need it, and it's a little colder and they want a little bit more sun to warm the soil and everything. And then once it gets too hot, the trees have grown in and they get a little bit of shade, which keeps them from bolting.
Nice.
And these again, have sort of gotten eaten by the woodchuck this year, unfortunately. So
nothing's left, huh?
Yeah, there isn't too much left, but I'll be reseeding that, towards the end of the summer to get another cool season crop out of the greens.
And it was what, bok choy that you're gonna have in this?
Yeah,
plan?
so this is bok choy, lettuce, and spinach grown in 3 rows next to each other.
Nice. Is this the pumpkin?
This is some squash, some zucchini back here. So I like to, this half of the garden is kind of, has some space that hasn't been cultivated yet. So I usually grow my squash and my zucchinis back here. Just give them some extra space to really travel,
Do you do anything with the flowers?
Sometimes you can eat them,
Yeah.
I don't generally eat them, I don't particularly like them, but some people like to eat them. You can cook them, or I think just eat them raw on a salad. So
I know some people, what they do with the flour, they kind of like put it in a light batter and deep fry it.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
I might like that. Everything's better if it's deep fried.
Oh, yeah, going on in this bed. Did anything survive or no?
Yeah, these beds did have some broccoli, which looks like it got eaten. Here's some of that self-seeded greens. You can see they're flowering. There's all different stages of these mesclun greens,
Nice.
spicy greens. There's young ones, there's medium-sized ones, and then there's full-size flowering ones.
Nice.
And I'll crop those similar to how we crop the cover crops, and just keep cutting them back, and they just keep growing, and I have all the greens that I could want all year, and I haven't had to plant these in 3 or 4 years now. They just come back every year on their own.
Nice.
The mustards and the greens and the brassica family are especially good at self-seeding.
Nice.
Arugula as well. So, moving along here, this is my garlic bed. And same strategy here. This is a perennial garlic bed. I haven't had to plant new garlic in several years now. I let it go to seed, and new babies will pop up. And also, garlic you can divide underground. So once it's developed into a full bulb, each one of the cloves is going to turn into a new plant if you just leave it alone. So you will just dig it and divide similarly to how you would do with flower bulbs or something like that. You know, once the garlic is sprouted from the bulb sometime in the spring, you can dig the whole thing, separate out the little plants, and spread them out, and you get, you know, a staggered harvest of garlic instead of just one big harvest in towards the end of the summer. You know, you can have some spring garlic, and then, you know, the garlic scapes around, you know, towards the beginning of the summer, and then another big harvest towards the end of the summer.
Nice.
Yep.
Love garlic.
Delicious. The scapes are the best part too. They're a little delicacy.
I think we're almost back to the full circle. I think where are we right now?
So this is just this is the last bed here is the carrot bed.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. And anything going on in the back yet, or no?
No, so I have designed the whole garden is a circle, as you can see. So the inner beds, there's 12 of them, and they are all a little bit more intensive production beds. They do get weeded and tilled, very gently tilled. I don't turn the soil, but I will dig into it with a shovel and wedge it and break it to work some compost deep in.
Okay.
And then the whole outer ring of the garden is a no-till bed. So it's a more of a perennial system, and it works out really nice ergonomically because as I do my weeding, the weeds that I don't want in the inner circle can all just get tossed outside onto the top of the sheet mulching, which is the outer ring, and it just keeps the nutrients in the garden. It also provides a nice barrier for the more aggressive weeds like the grass and things that, you know, people are oftentimes struggling to keep out of their inner garden. If you make a nice hedge on the outside, it can really help to control those weeds.
Nice. And here for the middle of the garden, what we got going on there?
Yeah, so the middle of the garden is a mixture of some flowers. I try to bring some pollinators and some beneficial insects right into the center circle, the heart of the garden. So right now is the poppies, the perennial poppies. They're a little bit easier to grow than the annual poppies. They just, you know, they will self-seed and come back every year, but they're a really beautiful plant. Pollinators love it. And then coming up next, there's some native sunflowers growing there. And there'll be some tulsi and some calendula. The calendula is the marigolds, which are really beneficial.
Yes, they are.
Yep.
Wow. So thank you for the view and the tour of this wonderful garden. For people who don't know much about you, why don't you give us a little background of how you acquire this knowledge?
So I've just kind of been always interested in plants. You know, I've always did a lot of gardening with my family growing up, and also house plants and pretty much just whatever I could get. And then I worked for a while selling organic fertilizers. So I was a salesperson and a representative of a company that did bulk organic fertilizers, all different raw ingredients, like crab shell meal and kelp and compost. Also worked for compost tea company, doing the compost tea for a long time. So that's kind of where I really started to get into soil science. I got to tour a lot of farms. There's a ton of organic farms in the Pioneer Valley, and really see a lot of great organic farming techniques, which I've tried to miniaturize and apply to my home garden.
Nice. It's a beautiful garden, and I love the variety of things that's going on. Sorry about the woodchuck taking down what was planned. But we also have a mini greenhouse as well too, right?
Yeah, there is a greenhouse, which definitely was a huge help in getting things started this spring. Yeah, let's walk over there. We can take a look.
So while we're heading over to this mini greenhouse, what's different about this mini greenhouse than normal greenhouse? I believe there's a matter of we have to go down into the greenhouse. Why is that?
Yeah, so this greenhouse I decided to go underground with. It's dug down about 3 feet down below the ground level for the purpose of, well, there's multiple benefits you get from it. First off is insulation, and the second is just getting down below the frost line. So in the wintertime, you get the ground temperature of 40 to 50 degrees that is constantly warming and insulating your space. So that's the major benefit of it in the wintertime, and the same principle applies in the summertime. It keeps the space nice and cool. We're standing in here now, and it is hot, but on a nice 80-degree day like today, if an above ground greenhouse would probably be unbearable to be in. They tend to just really accumulate a lot of heat. And I don't have a fan running in here.
Right.
I really only have one small ventilation window up near the top, and I keep the door open, and it's plenty cool and nice of an environment in here. So I get to save on electricity costs or running that fan all day long like you would in a traditional greenhouse. All those added benefits. So
Beautiful, man. Thanks, man. I love the work that you're doing here. As far as keeping the soil going through the winter, man, it's amazing. So as far as, soil health, what's the reason for you to do the garden the way you're doing it? Because most people, when they do their gardens, their summer gardens, they kind of use some of the chemical stuff that's out there. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've always tried to develop the whole ecosystem. So view, not just the garden, but the whole property that we're standing on as an ecosystem. And for that reason, all of the inputs into the ecosystem need to be wholesome and support all of the life, which is here. So the chickens, down to the pets, the cat and the dog, the humans, the plants, and all of the small life as well, the critters, the squirrels, and the microbes in the soil. Everybody needs to be supported by the inputs that come onto the land. So the chemical pesticides and fertilizers are pretty harmful across the board to all of those members of the ecosystem here.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, even in small amounts. Let me ask you, do you have any natural pesticides that you use, or do you believe in any kind of natural pesticides?
I do, yeah. There are various techniques for, depending on the pest. So for weed control, I generally use plants, other plants, and fertilizers, soil testing. All of these things are natural ways to control weeds. You use plants that outcompete them. You use soil testing to see what the root cause of the weeds growing is. They're often growing as a response to an unfavorable condition of the soil, whether it's too acidic and it needs some lime, or it doesn't have enough nutrients. One or the other will cause a lot of the weed problems that you see in a garden.
Right.
So for that pest, that's my general control method. For fungus and other diseases and things like that, I generally try to use natural products. I will use neem every now and again for fungal control. There are also some biodynamic methods which I like to use. The horsetail plant,
Nice.
which is a really common plant that grows in most kind of wet areas of farm fields, is very high in silica, and you can make a strong tea out of that, and you can spray plants, especially like fruit trees and perennials that are having fungal issues, and it works really great for that, taking care of those.
Nice. So I wanted to jump back when we were in the garden. You talk about different types of cover crops. If we
Yes.
can talk about the cover crops that you said that you're using here in Mass.
So my basic cover crops that I use are buckwheat in the early spring. Buckwheat is incredibly fast growing. You can get many crops of it every year, and it rapidly takes over the soil. It has a allelopathic effect, so it suppresses other plants that are around it. So when I'm reclaiming a bed, taking over some ground that was previously fallow, I'll crop with buckwheat early in the spring and frequently, 3 or 4 times. Then I start to weed that out and transition into the other things that we were talking about earlier, such as the oats and the legumes like clovers, vetch, peas are very good as well. They are all going to dig deep in the soil, bring nutrients up, and they have those rhizobacteria that fix the nitrogen.
So here I am, I'm not really a soil person with deep knowledge. I'm just trying to figure out how to do this organically. I'm just jumping into that seat. And you mentioned something about the peas and how it digs down deep. What's going on there as far as behind that? As far as when the root digs down deep, what does it do in turn and what does it pull up?
So all of the cover crops and even just your weeds like dandelions and clovers and all sorts of things that just pop up naturally. The lamb's quarters are a great example. They have really deep digging roots. So compared to many of your vegetable crops, which have relatively shallow roots, maybe they're going to go down, a foot or 6 inches. The natural plants, the dandelions, like burdock, things like that, they go down 3 feet sometimes. They have huge tap roots, which will go way down deep in the soil, where there are a lot of nutrients that are inaccessible to the plants.
Okay. So basically we're providing the nutrients itself to pull up through those roots, and it brings it up to the surface level, and then the plants itself with their shallow roots, they're able to grab those nutrients that are coming up.
That's correct, because all of their roots are connected via the mycelium and the soil food web, all of the microorganisms, the fungi and the bacteria that are making up that whole ecosystem under the ground.
Man, I love it. So as far as, with the water situation, what's the other benefits when it comes to having green mulch or even cover crops? Does that help with the water retention?
Absolutely, it does. Some of the extra vegetation does take some of the water, so you may have to water slightly more during the drought periods and just in general on your regular schedule because you have more vegetation in there. However, it gives you a great buffer for dry periods as well, so your plants are going to be less likely to dry out fast when you do have a drought period because of all of that green moisture that's retained just in the plants.
Nice.
And that goes for above ground and below ground. The relative humidity in a group of plants is going to be greater than one individual little vegetable stalk just all by itself getting baked in the sun. If it has plants all around it, it's going to have a little pocket of humidity, which is going to benefit its growth.
Nice. So, what about teas? What's your thoughts behind the teas? What's the benefits of brewing teas?
The teas are great. They provide all of the inoculant and microorganisms and some minor nutrients. When I first moved into this property about 6 or 7 years ago, it was pretty barren. There wasn't a lot of species diversity at all, and I relied heavily on the teas, aerated teas, to revamp the soil, to put everything back that had been lost over the years through neglect. And now I actually don't really need to apply that many, because the wonderful thing about the teas and the inoculants is that once you establish those colonies of microorganisms in your soil, they grow on their own and they reproduce. So I have them all here now in my garden and in my lawn, and I only need to apply them occasionally now, just for maintenance or for problem areas.
So, if you can, there's two types of teas, right? Fungal tea and a bacterial tea. What's the difference between those teas, and when should one apply those types of teas if you're, still kind of new to the tea?
Right, so the two different types of teas are going to be created based on a slightly different recipe. I like to think about it in the most simplest terms as brown and green. The brown promoting a fungal-based tea, and the green nitrogenous material promoting a more bacterial tea. And it's also a good way to look at how you're going to use those teas in your garden. A heavily bacterial area, such as the lawn, that really likes to be dominated by bacteria and less fungi, you want to put a more bacterial green tea on it. And the perennials, the woody areas, the more brown types of areas in the property, you want to use the more fungal-based brown teas.
Man. So, Chris, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We definitely, going to reach back out as the season goes. I just wanted to get an introduction so people could have some kind of landscape if they still want to think about getting into growing their own food or doing it organically, what it takes versus using, common applications for, I would say chemical fertilizers, right? Where most people run out every year, go to the store, go grab their little seedlings, and then they water with their little fertilizer. But if they can create their own space, even cut this down maybe a quarter of a size, they can produce their own food in a small section in their backyard, couldn't they?
Absolutely. You don't need much space at all. This whole property here is only about 3/4 of an acre, and as you can see, I'm only using a very small amount of it to grow, and the rest is just buffer land and for the animals and the chickens and some woods and things.
So let's just say, some folks are not able to have the backyard. What's your thought about bringing this indoors?
Bringing it indoors is great. You end up with a whole set of different challenges to overcome, which you can probably speak to better than I, being the indoor cultivator. But indoors you don't have the same sort of ecological buffer as you do outside. So the beneficial insects, which control a lot of your pests, and the pollinators, which come from the flowers and the ecosystem that are around, you don't have those things. But what you do have is you have a much smaller situation which you can really control and fine-tune. So in an indoor garden, it's all you. It's all you as the gardener to tend that miniature ecosystem. And then it becomes even more important to focus on the life that's underground in your soil when you're doing an indoor garden, because that's really where you have the remaining ecosystem as you do outside. If you have a living soil in your small pots indoors, that can give you a lot of that systemic pest resistance and that life and health that you get in an outdoor ecosystem.
Nice. Yeah, so I know I've asked you a lot of questions. Was there anything you wanted to input before we wrap it up that I didn't touch on in regards to just an intro on living soil?
I think we covered a lot of the bases today.
I know we did. So at the end of the day, we really appreciate your time. Comment below if there's something that you want to talk about when it comes to living soil. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks.